Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's news, views, trends, and opinions from an admittedly conservative perspective. I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and this evening we're joined by Gerry Cawthon. He's the chair of Bay Area Transportation Working Group, also known as BATWG. Gerry, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
So, full disclosure, Gerry and I have history together. I've been participating in BATWG over several years, not as much recently, but we're bringing Gerry back in to kind of give us an update on some of the transportation boondoggles and highlights from around the Bay Area since the last year and a half or two that he's been there.
Correct.
So,
okay.
You've got a big job ahead of you, Gerry, but we thank you for taking it on.
Fair enough.
But before we get started on that completely, give the viewers a little bit of a background on your history, kind of what makes you credible as a transportation activist. You're not just an angry guy, you actually have background working in the industry.
I've been involved in transportation since 1970, lived in Europe for 3 years, got all excited about how good it could be, came back here and eventually got connected in transportation. So I worked for the city during the time that they built the Market Street subway, and then I left and went to Parsons Brinckerhoff, and I worked there for 14 years, and I did nothing but transportation projects there. And then Corvey Engineers, another consulting firm, I worked more there. So I am a professional civil engineer in California, and I have had background both as a professional and as an activist.
And you've actually written some of these things to try to figure out if they were worth...
I do ride them more than you'd think, actually.
Right. So, true believer, experience, you've seen the professional side, you've seen the political side, and BATWG as an organization, if you can give us a little background on the kinds of things that you're pursuing or trying to educate the community about.
Okay, we formed in 2012. It's not a huge group, but it's quite active, and its basic idea is to return the balance to the system here in the Bay Area, which means you reduce the dominance and the dependency on the automobile by improving the non-automotive alternatives.
Right.
If you make the buses better and the trains better and the boats better and the bicycles all better, then you have an opportunity to attract more people out of their cars because they'll see some viable way of getting around. That's what BATWG is, it's what it's advocating. That's our mission really, is to bring the thing into better balance.
Okay. And you're doing this by giving people an incentive because of gains of efficiency versus just by forcing them out of their cars. You're actually trying to incent them out.
That's right. And there are people that are activists that I know who tend to take that other point of view. They want to force people out by doing things like removing all parking and putting bicycles in the way of traffic and squeezing down on the streets. My feeling has always been, and BATWG's feeling is, that we need to start by improving the alternatives to make them more attractive, then maybe ask people to use them more, and those who insist upon driving into congested areas might end up paying someday. But in the meantime, it's got to get better. It's got to get 60% better in the Bay Area before we're at that point, and unfortunately right now we're not moving in that direction.
Yeah, usability should be a factor, you would think, and instead, as you mentioned, we get narrower streets or traffic circles where they make no sense, or one-way roads where it doesn't really help anything. And so this is one of the things that I've always appreciated about your group, and also the diversity of it. We've had opportunities where we've worked together to build coalitions, where we had people like MoveOn.org working next to Tea Party people, working next to people that are all across the political spectrum, and nobody died at the end, and we actually put together ballot measures and things that were decent caliber work.
We work, if you get into something that isn't directly involved with what they fool around with in Washington, you find you can get things done by ignoring liberal versus conservative, just being logical, just being practical, just being cost conscious, and also the protection of the environment. If all those four things are working, and you come up with an amalgamated plan that takes it into account, you gradually make it more attractive. And people will say, well, that's impossible. Americans love their cars. Well, I've been in Europe, I've been in Japan, I know it's possible. There, I don't believe Americans are any different than anybody else. If one way is a lot more convenient and cheaper than another way, what are we all going to do? We're going to take the cheapest route. However, if the alternatives are much better, then we might try something new. That's sort of the challenge.
Well, and we're going to be talking about BART for a few minutes here, but that's one of the things. I love my car. I love being in it. I love testing the fuel economy at rates over the speed limit. There are all sorts of things that I enjoy about my car. But if I want to go into the city and it's convenient to take BART, I consider it until I get to the BART station and it's not usable. There are no parking spaces anywhere. I can't park my car to get out. By the time I'm at my second or third BART station, I'm thinking, no, you know, I'm just going to go ahead and drive in because I'm already running late. And it's things like that that just usability-wise would make transportation more attractive.
Well, if you think of the Bay region, I don't want to get too technical, but if you think of it as a series of networks, different agencies have their turf. There's this AC, there's BART, there's Muni, there's VTA. They all have pieces. They don't fit together very well.
There's no cohesion.
There's a little, but not nearly enough. I could give you a half a dozen places where with a relatively small investment you could knit together the places where the system breaks down to make it more like an overall regional network rather than just a bunch of pieces that now and then almost by accident fit, but many times do not fit.
All right, you just threw a challenge on the table for yourself. Give me one or two examples where that easy knitting might be sensible, just to pique people's interest of how your brain works.
Okay, you got the Capital Corridor trains that go from Auburn all the way down to San Jose. A big, long intercity train, very high quality, a lot of fun to ride it, lots of nice seats, they've got coffee, it's just a great ride. However, there's no connection to BART unless you get off in Richmond, in which case you've got the detour through Berkeley and the Rock Ridge District, takes an extra 20 minutes to get into San Francisco, or if you happen to be coming from the south, you can get off at the Coliseum station, and that switches you to BART there. What they need is a efficient connection in West Oakland, where BART and the Capital Corridors come together, and that means it cuts 20 minutes off the trip to San Francisco for anybody on these Capital Corridor long-distance trains, and I think it's over 10 minutes even into downtown Oakland by making that transfer. I've been pushing that thing for about 15 years. It never gets done, and now it might be almost too late because now the capacity, because they've ignored the need to improve the capacity of Trans-Bay, they now have a problem where BART is actually running out of capacity. They're actually reaching a point where their peak periods are going to get longer and longer and longer because they haven't proceeded with whatever they need. They need a tube someday, but that's, you know, you're talking like $25 to $30 billion. That's not going to happen anytime soon, even if they had the money, which they don't. So you need to do something with AC to make it more attractive so more people will ride it. That would then allow you to set up that little knitting exercise I'm talking about. That's one. Another even more obvious one is right now you've got a Dumbarton rail bridge. It's falling down, it's not being used. The Dumbarton Highway Bridge, as you probably know if you're commuting on it, is like a parking lot a lot of times, much time. It's really pathetic. If they had a really good rail shuttle from Redwood City to Union City across the rail bridge, rebuilt, you'd have to rebuild it. Now you give people that want to go from, let's say, Mountain View to the east side of the bay where a lot of the people live, you've got an alternate way of doing it. Today, the only alternate you've got is to get on a bus, and then the bus is bogged down in the same traffic as everybody else. That is asinine. That is ridiculous that a busload of people would be subjected to the same grueling backups that everybody else has, but they haven't moved on that either.
Right.
So they need a lane for the buses. They don't have the room for the bus lanes. So the next best thing is to put a rail connection across there. That's two examples of where these knitting opportunities are. There's others.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, if you look, I was on the Dumbarton Bridge yesterday, and as Facebook is getting ready to release their workers for the day around 5 o'clock, you'll see about 50 or 60 buses go over the Dumbarton Bridge and then wait to stage to go inside Facebook when it's time to go.
Yeah,
and a similar kind of scenario happens here in Mountain View with the Google buses. You'll see them all parked, and I know of other places around the Bay Area where the buses are catching on because people want to commute in a way that's more sane, as far as not having to be on the roads themselves when they're tired or be able to work efficiently. And yet, we're not doing things to further their efficiency, such as taking existing infrastructure, repairing or upgrading it, and then utilizing that in a way that's going to be helpful and reduce traffic for people environmentally concerned about carbon footprints. All of that stuff can be addressed, as well as cost and time efficiency.
Well, you're right, and you mentioned the private initiatives being taken. There are people, especially in San Francisco, who say that anything private is evil.
They do.
However, we don't look at it that way. We look at improving the efficiency. If there was a little healthy competition between a private operation and a public operation, that would be great, because the public sector is a little bit too relaxed about its missions. It needs something. So the high-tech industry very intelligently has seen the need to do something. Now, there are problems with the buses in San Francisco. I've got friends up there who are upset about how it affects certain neighborhoods. But the truth is, if you get a busload of people, that means a busload of cars that are not on the road. And so it makes sense to do that as much as possible. But the fixes that I'm talking about would make the public part much better. Still would probably have a need for these high-tech buses. That's fine too. They can both be operating.
Well, you can have options. There should be no challenge against options.
Right.
And then whichever one works best for you in your scenario, you should be able to take advantage of. So talk to us about different projects happening around the Bay Area that we should be aware of, either because, again, they're highlights, or they're looking like a boondoggle that's about to waste a bunch of money, or, as we were discussing before the show, situations like the previous Measure AA and others that tax people with the promises of delivering things like BART to Livermore, which has now been disapproved, which was easy to predict from the beginning. So let's talk about that one actually first.
Want to talk about that one?
It's important to me. I live in Livermore.
I know you do. That's right. Well, the options, there were 4 options, and 2 of them didn't work at all. There was a cheapo bus option that was not high quality, and then there was a diesel-operated train that works extremely well in Contra Costa County. It just opened, just 2 weeks ago it opened. Goes from Pittsburgh Bay Point clear out to Antioch. It is a very, very nice city, nice system. It is well connected to BART. It is comfortable. It is extremely quiet inside. And you have the joy of going up and down in that train and passing cars on Highway 4 that are moving along at 15 miles an hour. You go at 75 miles an hour. That's pretty satisfying, and it's already carrying, I think, 50% more than it was projected to in 2 weeks. It's already way over what they expected because it makes sense.
Right.
Now, let's take the one that does not make sense. Let's come back to Livermore again. Some of the people in Livermore, led by a famous county supervisor that I won't name but could, they are absolutely determined that because they've been paying into the BART system for decades, they deserve a BART line all the way out into this extremely low density, spread out community that is not really dense enough to support it. So as a result of that, the ridership was, I think it's 13,400 riders a day. 3/4 of Muni's buses in San Francisco carry more than that. Just buses carry that. The 38 line carries like over 50,000 riders a day. So 14,000 riders a day does not justify the cost, and the cost is $1.635 billion.
Okay.
Right? $1,600 million is what it would cost to build 5 miles from the existing BART terminal at East Dublin all the way out to Isabel Avenue in Livermore. So that one is okay, but it would be way, way too expensive. It would also increase the BART's maintenance cost tremendously, require a brand new maintenance facility out there, a rail maintenance facility somewhere in Livermore. It removes, I think it's 96 car storage, BART car storage spaces from east of the station. So now they got a storage and a maintenance problem. And it is generally a very, very cost ineffective proposal. So the other decent one that we favor is an express bus alternative. Not the same thing as you have today, something much closer to what we were talking about before, which is the high-tech buses. Something that has a certain amount of quality in it. It's quiet, it's got a comfortable ride, it's out of traffic at least in the rush, the peak period. Out of traffic in the peak period. Why just the peak period? Well, there's two reasons. One reason is that a bus lane interferes with the adjacent small business people. They don't feel they get the access if you got bus lanes. However, if you set it up, let's say in Livermore between, 5 o'clock and 8 o'clock, you don't have that conflict because the stores don't open until, except for coffee shops, until 10. So you've eliminated any conflicts. The transit exclusive lane becomes a lot less cumbersome and obstructive if it's done for just a relatively few number of hours. And of course, it's much cheaper to enforce that. You cannot get the police to deploy enough people to enforce a transit-only lane all day long. It just doesn't happen.
And, in places like Stanley Boulevard in Livermore, it already exists. They do have lanes that are there for expressing buses, and
well, that kind of thing needs to be expanded all day if they can, but I would say if they cannot, the fallback is for a limited number of hours.
Right.
And now so there's going to be a high-quality bus system. Instead of costing 1.635, it's about 300 million. So that's about a quarter of the cost. So the capital cost drops tremendously. The operating cost goes from $22 million a year to $300,000 a year. Drops even more, you see, because it's so much cheaper to maintain that fleet of buses. That comes right out of the EIR. It's not my figure. It's right in the environmental impact report. Right. So there are many reasons for seeing the bus alternative as superior. So the task or the challenge is to convince the people of Livermore that they will get a really good connection between the existing end of BART and wherever they need to get to within Livermore. And there'll also be big parking garages. If they had they'd have a stop at Isabella, a bus stop out there, and there'd be a big parking facility there. So you could drive in there, park your car, be on the bus, which would take you right to the station, and it's about I think it's a 5-minute ride or something like that, and then you're on your way on BART.
Right.
So that's the one we favor, and as you said, the BART board has now rejected the expensive one.
Right.
And the other one is sort of in limbo right now.
Well, the question I would have, and this is probably applicable to other projects that you're watching or other tax schemes that you've observed, is the voters were told that there was $400 million in AA, as an example, to bring BART to Livermore, and that's why they should totally vote for this. And $400 million was only a percentage of what it was going to cost to build, less than 25%. But now what happens to that money? The tax came, but no BART.
Well, you're talking about Measure BB.
Or Measure BB, sorry, yes.
It passed in 2014. That had, as you say, $400 million allocated to that quarter, but not for BART, for improving the transit connections between BART and Livermore. Could have been BART, could have been a DMU, which is a diesel multiple unit run by diesel engines, but rather nice, or a bus system.
Right.
So Mr. Supervisor Haggerty out there is apparently telling people, of course it's for BART, naturally that's for BART, but that's what we expected when we voted the $400 million. Well, that's not what the proposition says. It says it leaves it much more flexible.
Right.
So the question is, who's going to get that money and how's it going to be spent? And right now, that is an issue that is totally up in the air.
And are there other places where you're seeing that kind of potential bait and switch opportunity for politicians who might just be caring about where the money is there versus where it actually goes?
Yes, I'd see quite a bit of that. Let's just talk about RM3 for a minute. That's something everybody just voted on June 5th.
Everyone where?
The whole Bay Area.
Okay.
All 9 BART counties voted for that.
Okay.
It raises $4.45 billion, and those dollars in the expenditure plan for the regional measure 3 basically has 35 projects, and some of the projects are good. They need money for new BART vehicles. There's a substantial grant in there for that. They need some new Muni vehicles. There's need for that. There's some things in San Jose they need. There's some things in Contra Costa. But most of the projects are very, very weak. And it also, we get into the question about, will the money be spent for what the voters voted for? And the answer is not necessarily, because once the vote is passed, this is all under the control of MTC. If it decides that somebody's not ready for its funds, but some other project which they like is, then that money gets diverted. We got a lot of money came out of the Dumbarton Rail project of a few years ago, ended up, I think, maybe buying the new MTC headquarters. I don't know where it went, but it definitely was taken out of that budget. So they have the power over there, or think they do, to change money around. So when you vote for something, is it going to get built? Well, maybe. The highway projects will, because Caltrans is right there to make sure they do. I don't personally think that, I think they put too much money into highways, because one thing everybody in the region ought to know is when you make a highway bigger, more people find reasons to drive on it. And so the net effect of that is the highway comes back to its previous level, but since it's bigger, the total number of cars on that highway has increased, and you multiply that all around the region, that pretty much explains why the traffic backups and the congestion in the cities has gotten worse. The place grows, more people come in, highways are bigger, so more people, you go see your, instead of seeing your aunt once a year, maybe you go see her 3 times a year because you can get there 15 minutes faster. Pretty soon the 15 minutes is gone, and it takes you just as long. So this is a losing proposition. Putting the highways aside, let me give you a couple of really idiotic transit systems. Now, I love ferry boats. They're really a lot of fun. Fun to go from Oakland to Larkspur to Angel Island, wherever you're going. However, they're slow. So because they're slow, they carry a minute percentage of Bay Area traffic. I think it's something like 0.04%. 7.5% of RM3 is devoted to ferry boats. $300 million goes to ferry boats. That's much more than that particular system should have. Maybe it should have 50 million, but 300 million is very rich considering it's carrying a very minor number of people, because it's just not fast enough. And that's typical of a number of projects.
So over-allocation of funds versus no way of getting a return on that investment.
No way of getting a return at all in terms of riders leaving the freeways or unloading BART, nothing like that.
And I hate to cut you off, Jerry, but we are actually running out of time. If people want to track more about what you're doing, is there a website or a way that they can reach out to you?
Sure. I'll give you the website of BATWG, which is, as you said, the Bay Area Transportation Working Group. It is www.batwgblog, B-L-O-G, all one word, batwgblog.com.
All right.
That, we have a lot of articles in there about all of these things that I've talked about and some more. Right. So people are welcome to take a look.
All right. Well, if you'll hold on for just a moment, we'll be back after a word from our underwriters, the formerly Conservative Forum, now the Liberty Forum.
Okay.
Some people think that a meeting of conservatives in Silicon Valley could fit in a small room. In fact, when the Conservative Forum was founded in 2003, we did meet in a small room, a coffee shop in San Jose. It doesn't get more grassroots than this. It may surprise you that there are thousands of people right here in Silicon Valley who share your principles of liberty, free markets, and limited government. Since our humble beginnings in that coffee shop, we've outgrown 3 meeting halls. From San Jose to Gilroy to Mill Valley, we bring hundreds of people together each month from all over the Bay Area to promote the principles of American liberty. How do we do it? It starts with a stellar lineup of speakers. Speakers like Steve Forbes, Senator Jim DeMint, Dr. Victor Davis Hanson, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, Andrew Breitbart, Pamela Geller, and many others. These speakers passionately articulate our shared principles and remind us why conservatism isn't just the smart choice, it's also the moral choice. Our monthly meetings are only one dimension of the forum. We underwrite The Right Side, a monthly television show on cable access channel KMVT. We also host a monthly Constitution discussion group and provide tables at our meetings for more than a dozen local groups who share our love of liberty to promote their specific cause. The Conservative Forum is the premier place in Silicon Valley for conservatives to gather, become invigorated, motivated, and empowered. We welcome guests to our monthly meetings and offer special discounted pricing to first-time visitors. Take a look at our speaker lineup in the coming months and join us to learn why we say liberty is made in America.
And that was a word from our underwriters, the Liberty Forum. What they're best known for is their speaker series. We've appreciated them underwriting the show for the last, now we're midway through our 7th season, but the speaker series is really the draw to the Liberty Forum name. And that occurs the second Tuesday of each month at 7 o'clock at the IFES Portuguese Hall at 432 Stearland Road, about 3 minutes from here in Mountain View. This evening actually will be nearly a sold-out show, but by the time you're able to catch this show and look at what's happening soon, July will be the next speaker, which is Mona Charen, syndicated columnist, political analyst, a best-selling author, and former White House speechwriter. In August, Brad Dacus, president of the Pacific Justice Institute, will be speaking. In September, Larry Elder, a syndicated radio commentator. And in October, Rehan Salam, conservative political commentator, columnist, and author, and the executive editor of National Review. Check those out at the conservativeforum.com. Still works to get you there. That'll give you times, speakers, and any other information you need on Liberty Forum. In closing this evening, Jerry and I had talked about the fact that transportation can be sometimes considered a dry topic, but when you're sitting in traffic or you're sitting somewhere away from your family or the life you pursue to try to get to and from work or to and from the locations where you're trying to get, all of a sudden transportation becomes very relevant to you. But unfortunately, a lot of the money that's spent on transportation is wasted. Organizations like BATWG will help to maybe give opinions on things you should pay attention to act out against or in favor of, so that you can get the best transportation solutions for your tax dollars. So I would encourage you to look up BATWG and other organizations like it if getting places is important to you. On that note, we'd like to thank you for joining us this evening on The Right Side. I've been your host, Chris Pareja. And if you would like to ask questions, throw flaming darts at us, just reach out to us at therightsidetv@gmail.com, or we'll see you in person or on the show sometime soon. Thanks again, and have a great night.